Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get-started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our shows, be sure and check out Patreon. Go to Opperman Report Patreon. Great new content up there. We have the last show coming up with William Hamilton, hour number 3, who is the man at the center of the Promise software, the Danny Casolaro story, the octopus. Several deaths around that story, including Danny Casolaro, and a national security agent who was found beaten to death in his car at the airport. There was an unsolved mystery of how this man was killed. So both me and William are kind of nervous about the content going out there. So we would appreciate your support. Also, too, I'm putting up there the D.C. Madam's phone records. I'm going to be putting that up there shortly. That'll be up there for free at Opperman Report Patreon. You can find our shows Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do a live show every Friday night on Spreaker.com. You go there. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content. And you can 4,000 hours worth of shows on there, 10 years worth of shows and content in our archives. And if you go there and look up Alan Graham, Captain Pink, you'll find the first show we did with our guest today, Alan Graham, who's also known as Captain Pink. You can find him at his website, which is called coronado-clarion.com/silo. Coronado-clarion, CLARION.com/silo. And that's where all his books are. You can find all 3 of his books. One is called I Remember Jim Morrison 2, Before the Beatles Were Famous, and Poet Rain by Alan Graham. Mr. Graham, are you there?
I am, sir. Mr. Clark, thank you for having me on again.
No, thank you, man. I tell you, I was talking yesterday. This is after that show, man. I was just like on cloud 9. I enjoyed it so much. So thank you. We were talking about Jim Morrison because you're Jim Morrison's brother-in-law.
Well, you're a bloody good interviewer, and you brought the best out in me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, my friend. Now, a real question I had after we got off the phone yesterday when we were talking is, can you clarify for me the relationship between Jim and his father, the Admiral? You said that the Admiral stepped in and helped him out when he had that arrest in Florida. And what about into the investigation of the death?
First of all, the Admiral reluctantly stepped in at the urging of Jim's lawyers to at least write him a decent letter. He said, my son is a good man. I think this was all just a mistake. He wrote it in, but he wrote it reluctantly. That helped, but it didn't help. It wasn't sincere enough. But before that, Jim had vowed, because the FBI came to Admiral's house when Jim did not show up for the draft, and he was livid, and he said, go after him, put him in jail, just like that. So Jim heard it. He went undercover, he went underground. He lived under a tarp on a rooftop in Venice, ate out of food dumpsters, and was a year, maybe more, just languishing on the beach. Ray Manzarek met him after a year and said, hey, Jim, what are you doing? He said, I'm drinking this Jack Daniels. I said, what else are you doing? He said, I'm writing this poetry. The rest is history. But the Admiral never, ever, ever got over it, because very soon the draft would become the lottery. And the lottery was so all those who had evaded it, they're not going to go catch them all. They went to Canada. They went everywhere. And so Jim's now famous, which meant he was contributing to the tax base, which means he was a regular citizen, which means if they put him in jail, they would destroy all that. And the government is wise in their way. They said, okay, let him make some money in repentance. But the admiral never forgot it. 10 years after Jim died, we were all sitting in the living room, and the news came on. 10 years ago, Jim Morrison died, and at his height, he was selling $10,000 a night tickets. Well, $10,000, that's $110,000 in this day.
Sure.
The admiral was making $35,000 a year. He had benefits with the Navy for dental and food and a whole bunch of other little things that you get benefits in the Navy. But he looked at me and he said, yeah, but that's not real money. That's Hollywood money. I said, that's real money, not him. He thought ill-gotten gains or money gotten the wrong way was not regular. So that's how impractical he was. At the same time, the most practical of men. But that was denial, and that was rage, and that was anger, because he almost brought that to an end with his reckless behavior of sending the FBI after Jim. Jim never forgot that. He also never forgot that his mother ignored the fact when he was 9 years old, he went to her and said one of the relatives molested him. She said to him, you dream that, and if you ever say it again, you'll be in real trouble. He threatened him, and he shut up. But that's when it began to end with his mother.
Fascinating. I never heard that before. Now, let me ask you a question. What about any other Morrison brothers or sisters? Were they artists and creative types too as well, like Jim?
No, Andy was what they call the second man, which means everybody said, you're Jim's brother, and they'd all be talking about his
right.
And then what? And then somebody inevitably would say, oh, this is Andy's brother. I met him, but you should have seen his brother. So Morrison adopted that mantle of second guy, and he was bright. Believe me, Morrison was bright. He knew about everything. He studied in school, and he knew about literature. He even knew how to make a bomb in his chemistry class. He was an educated guy, but he always played it down by saying, yo, bro, let's do this, pretending he was a middle class. No, pretending he was a working class guy. He got a job as a welder and a carpenter. He wasn't very good at them, but he stuck with them, intermittently. So he dressed down, what we call dressing down in Hollywood. If you've got a lot of money, a lot of status, you pretend you're ordinary so people don't come up and hit you up.
Now, Alan Graham, what were you doing for a living this period of time? I know you have a background in security, investigations, and even intelligence, it appears, you alluded to. What were you doing for a living during this period of time?
I was always the entrepreneur, but I was also had a secret life of espionage, or let's say just going on missions to set things to right, mostly.
And that would be the type of mission where you go out on the mission and you come back alone. It's two guys and one guy comes back.
No. Mostly I went alone. Okay. And what I did, I hired cutouts in the field. They never knew my name. I knew all about them, but they knew nothing about me.
Right.
I was a guy who just simply advertised for someone's labor for the day.
Gotcha.
Some of them were.
Then what was your relationship like with the Admiral? He must have had some kind of affinity and respect for you, being in kind of in similar fields.
Go, girls, go. He knew that I was on the case. He knew that I was investigating Jim's death. He did not like any of it. He did not want me to see the Jim Morrison movie, and yet he had respect because he knew I came from the streets. And he also knew that I was formidable. He had his own intelligence on me. He was a high-security admiral. It wasn't just an admiral. He was a nuclear admiral, which means around him there's a wall of anyone who comes into it, doesn't care who it is, a brother-in-law right up on the grid. Who is this guy? What does he do? And I would be, scrutinized.
Yeah.
So he knew, because they'd informed him a couple of times, subtly, that I was this and I was that. And when I was with Flint, he called me up and saying, what have I done to you? And would you come home? So I came home, and he called me on the phone and said, Alan, welcome home, son. Welcome home. No, all is forgiven. None of that. It was just, let's say, he just acknowledged it without saying it. He started talking about the future instead of the past. Then something terrible happened. Althea Flint, Larry Flint's wife, died, and the whole thing blew up. And I was still there. And then a bunch of other people, like Mitch LaBelle, died.
Well, let's back up just a little bit there, because I want to spend a lot of time on this. How did you first meet Flint, and how did you first become involved in the whole Flint private security world, all those characters he had around him?
Well, I was advertising in the Los Angeles Times for a co-producer because the Admiral put the kibosh on my project. Not only did I get Flint, but I got Sylvester Stallone and a bunch of other wannabes. Sylvester Stallone thought he was going to play Jim Morrison. Anyway, Flint called me up one day in my hospital bed in Westlake, California. I was recovering from kidney stones. I was on morphine, Demerol, and Fagan. And he said to me this, "Is this Alan Graham?" I said, "Yes, it is. I'm Larry Flint. I'm interested in your project. Now, you want to come visit me at my penthouse or at my home?" I said, "Well, I'll take the penthouse. At least I'll be able to find a body there, whatever this was." So, because he's had all sorts of publicity around him about the John DeLorean cocaine case,
right,
the Vicky Morgan sex murder, a bunch of other prime cases in the media at the time that he simply would lash himself to its moorings and become part of it and jump in, interfere with the DA, interfere with the FBI, interfere with the prosecutor, and just generally gin it all up. So, a lot of people were very close to getting acquitted because he tainted it so bad. That was his job. If he thought something was very wrong with the DeLorean case, and it was, the FBI set him up, we went in there full force. Got the name of the agent's office, got the name of the agent, put out some little chitter on the gossip circuit back then is what it was.
Sure.
And very soon, that would be either his job would be changed to a new prosecutor, but they never let Flint go.
Now, how was Flint accumulating like blackmail material?
Althea Flint was always looking for something on. For example, when I went to Springfield with a cacophony of weird, not a cacophony, a parade of weirdness on a purple jet, I landed in Springfield, Missouri with hookers, pimps, murderers, wannabe murderers, and just people along for the ride. They all had money, or they wanted money, and at the time Larry was offering $1 million to anyone who could bring proof that he was shot by the FBI or somebody else. No one knew at this point, so he had this $1 million check hanging out. And that's what he did as a job, and that's what I did. In the middle of it, I was contacted to say, you're doing Flint. Now you have to do us. And there was no question. I had no way I could not do. So I did. I went undercover. I dismantled his entire security operation by ingratiating myself close to Flint with stories that he wanted to hear. Then I fired everybody. The security guard, his own brother-in-law, had his own team. His wife had his own team, had her own team. They were all murderers, ex-Vietnam, and she called them her pack. So there was Jimmy Flint, his brother, Althea Flint, his wife, Bill Ryder, his brother-in-law, all had a vested interest in seeing me dead, because what he did, he gave me carte blanche, power of attorney. He said, I trust Graham more than any of you. And that's when the war began. Every single one of them came after me. Bill Ryder with his bodyguards, because he had the same team that he had, was on my security detail in Springfield until they were not. I put my own people in, but Bill Ryder and a couple of his bodyguards were still out on the outside trying to blacken me. Bill Mensa, who's now doing life in prison, and Alex Marty, two of his bodyguards, tried to plant C4 on me. They tried to say that I was the bomber of the Capitol building in 1983. I talked to my friend Jeremiah Denton, who was a senator in charge of intelligence, and he said, that's bullshit. We know who did it. It was the AFL-FM, the Puerto Rican group, and you're clear. And I said, can you say that in public? He said, not quite yet. So I walked around with that in my jacket for a long, long time. Jeremiah Denton retired, and only then could I get it released.
Okay, let me stop you for a second, because I'm familiar with the FALN bombing of 1983, and I don't think you were involved in that. Now, but what are your politics? How would you describe yourself and your political view of the world?
First of all, I am a capitalist with a heart, which means I like to make money for my friends and me. I don't like to live wealthy, but I like to live comfortably because I'm 80 now. I don't have to rush around scraping anymore. But the real job is I want you to listen to this. I have a group called Los Caballeros de Los Angeles, the Knights of Los Angeles. They are all a bunch of wealthy men, and we coalesce on certain days of the year. We all get together, we have a glass of brandy, and we go on what we call knight-errant campaigns. For example, the knight-errant is someone who works for the king, and he's got a castle and all of that. But if he knows that an old lady's land is being taken from her by even a royal, they go get him, take it back. And the king would give them a pass because he knew it was only going on their weekend. It wasn't something that they were reckless. They were doing justice, and they allowed it. And they existed until the 12th century when the French king wanted all their money, and he dispersed them and killed a lot of them. But most of the money and everything else went to a place called Scotland. And that's where it is to this very day. They have a Knights Templar building in London, a round church called the Templar Church. All the history of all the knights and all the people. So I'm walking in the shoulders of those great men who did good deeds. And on this world, I kick open puppy mill doors. I will drag a liver-lipped truck driver who is saying he's going to charge $200 to open an old lady's front door or a lock on their car in Coronado. I just challenge them all. I do many other things.
So you consider yourself a righteous revolutionary, righting wrongs out there, right?
That's it.
There you go.
Righting wrongs.
And I think of myself the same way. And a lot of people don't, but I think of myself that way, right? But okay, you're a guy out there. You're doing stuff now. You're let's see all the stuff around Flint. Well, let's start with this. Bill Ryder. Was Bill Ryder CIA?
No, he's a punk. He's an ex-cop from Ohio, a Vietnam veteran, suffered PTSD, had a huge cocaine problem, was on edge. He was a grenade with a 9mm. That's how volatile he was. All of his people under him were all, they'd killed their officers. They'd fragged their officers in Vietnam. They're all proud of it. So Bill Ryder was the first to say, my God, Alan Graham's got the power now. I have nothing. The first thing they did, Bill Mensa and him, called the FBI and said Graham was the bomber of that building, and we found some C4 on him, and we took it off him and threw it in the sink. So it was a lie. The FBI didn't believe it was a lie until I got Jeremiah Denton to talk to them off record, let's say on background.
Right.
So they could really find out who did it.
Real quick. Between Mensa and Ryder, were they just making a call to the FBI hotline, or they had a guy in the FBI they could go to?
Never had a guy in the FBI. Always with snitches on the outside making an anonymous call. But
okay.
the FBI knew who they were because they had the phone set.
Okay. Well, yeah, clearly, because we see, I have those FBI documents on the Patreon, in the free section of Patreon, Opera Report Patreon. You can see all the stuff in there about the attempted assassination of Bill Menser, of Mitch Warbell, and all that kind of stuff. Now,
well, look, there was also, this was their stock in trade. That was Ryder's MO. He would often drop a dime on anybody or everybody.
Well, it seems like the guys who are out there doing stuff, getting away with stuff, are always informants as well. They're out there talking to the cops every day.
And they are allowed to.
Yeah. All right. Now, with this incident with the Menser and Ryder, was this before or after the Cotton Club murder?
What happened was, one night in the basement, a guy called Jack Zwern, he brought $10,000 in $1 bills because we were going to. Well, me and
take your time. Catch your breath and take your time.
We had $10,000 in $1 bills.
There you go.
We were crushing them up because we were going to make with a big scene at the courthouse. We also had $10,000 worth of pennies, which we put in grain wheelbarrows. We wheeled them up to the front of the security building. We walked in with the dollar bills crushed up in plastic bags. By the way, there was no security back then.
Yeah, I know.
We walked in. The judge said, "Did you bring the father?" He said, "Yes, I did." And a beautiful hooker stood up and just dropped them all on the floor, as per my instructions. The judge lost it. He said, "Pick them all up, and I'll take Mr. Flint and the rest of his group upstairs. They will unfold them." And that's what we did all day. In the meantime, I ordered shrimp and lobster and pizza and champagne, and we brought it all in and had a lovely Mad Hatter's party, and the feds joined us. Halfway through, because we were all getting tired, for $5,000 worth, somebody spilled a little champagne. They got one of the dollar bills wet, and we all looked at it. It was flat. So we just dipped them all in water, and it went like clockwork. They were all flat and wet, but they all went in, and they were unraveled. So.
Well, okay, but my question, though, the Cotton Club murders, was that before or after this incident with Ryder and Menser trying to take you down and calling the FBI on you, planting the C4?
Cotton Club murders in the year before, I believe, in 81 or even 80. I'm not sure. You'll have to look it up. But before I came into it, I already knew what they'd done, believe me. I already knew, and that's how I convinced Flint, let me take the power of attorney, let me bring my people in, put some real safety measures in here. And we did.
Okay, so then you're saying that Flint and the other bodyguards and security people were aware of the Cotton Club murders before Menser was picked up?
When did you see the Cotton Club murders revealed?
When did I see what?
That the Cotton Club murders were revealed.
Oh, I don't remember, but I remember seeing watching on the news and seeing Roy Raiden, the New York City producer, found dead. Yeah.
No, as I say, nobody knew the security guard. I already knew Ryder's snitching background. That's all.
Right.
When in 1984 or even 85, that's when Bill Ryder was so broke, he turned snake on Menser, Marty, and the other guy, forget his name. They're all doing life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Right.
As you know, or you don't know, one of the cousins is working with me on a couple of other stories surrounding Flint. You know him.
I'd love to interview him, too, if I could. If you could arrange an interview with him, I'd love to talk to him. Menser heard my show that I did about him. We did a couple shows about Menser, and he heard them in prison. He said he enjoyed them. So, who knows that? Well, let me ask a question. Back to Bill Ryder for 1 second. Bill Ryder went to the cops, and he says, hey, I loaned these guys my gun. They went out and committed a murder with it and brought me the gun back. He gets in no trouble for that?
Listen what happened.
Okay.
He told the feds, I've got some information on it. They didn't believe him. They thought he was just doing like he did before. Turns out they said, okay, if that's true, let's get him on tape again. And Ryder went with a wire, and he said, listen, I got a contract to kill Alan Graham. I want you to come on a mission with me. And they said, fuck yeah, we'll get out and get more money. And he said, sorry for swearing.
It's okay.
I have Tourette's syndrome.
Yeah.
Where I involuntarily speak vulgarities. I'm lying through my teeth, but I slipped up there.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry. Okay. So he went to them and said, listen, are you sure you can handle this one? Because Graham's a wily people. He's got people all around him. And they said, we're going to use Plan X, which they all knew. I didn't. But they knew what it meant together, so they could talk in code. And so he said, tell me what happened out there in the desert. And Marty said, we blew his face off, and all was left was a stalk of his head, and we left him out in the desert. And laughed and giggled and laughed. Ba-da-boom. On tape. Confession.
Now, on that, I've heard that confession, and they say that they shot him 13 times on Friday the 13th. Did that actually happen?
That's it. Yes. Can you imagine the terror of that man who was picked up at Cotton Club and driven all the way out to the desert, knowing that they were going to kill him?
Well, Roy Raden was no nice guy, though. You know what I mean?
Like scumbag.
Yeah, he was a piece of work, okay, and I couldn't think of a better end for this character. What about the story about you say Maury Terry found a Bible out there that was open to a certain passage? Do you believe that, or you think it might be some people will question it?
Larry Flint?
Maury Terry, who wrote the book The Ultimate Evil, and he describes the murder of Roy Raden, and he had a lot of information about Roy Raden being involved in snuff films. He says he went out to the scene of the disposal of the body in that canyon, and he found a Bible that was open to a certain passage.
Nice little fluff. Not true.
Don't believe
Bullshit.
it? Gotcha.
No, sir.
What about...
Wait a minute. Listen to this.
Yes.
It's lying out there at the murder scene. It's out in the desert. The prevailing winds are constant. And he's out there in the wind, because it was a little in the higher desert. Those pages would have been blowing back and forth and not stopping.
Well, not if it was upside down. If the book was upside down, it would hold the pages. I don't know. I don't know the conditions.
Oh, you mean he turned it over?
I don't know. I don't know. It could be, though. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
Don't believe it.
Yeah. Now, were you ever involved in conversations with Menser, Marti, Ryder, where they discussed openly the Cotton Club, the murder of Roy Raden?
No, but they couldn't shut their mouths with other stuff. They just couldn't shut up bragging.
Well, let's stick to this for a minute. Did it ever come up anything about the Process Church cult or the Son of Sam murders was somehow connected to Roy Raden and this group?
Every single lunatic has got a theory. That's another theory.
So you have no information to corroborate that?
Certainly not.
Okay. What do you know about the connections between Larry Flint Publications and High Times Magazine and Tom Forssad?
He supported them. He also supported the L.A. Free Press.
Okay.
He supported any radical, like he had his own magazine, which I oversaw, called The Rebel. And we printed stories in that no one would print. It was a great magazine. I'll get a copy sometime. Timothy Leary was one of the editors, and Frank Zappa was called to see if he wanted to edit. And he wrote back a letter. So he came to the mansion, talked to me, and he said, okay, I'm interested. I'll go home, and I'll type out my things I need. He came back, said, dear Larry, I would need at least $1 million in cash and a completely free hand. So a letter came back by messenger from Sacco's house. I opened it. I read it. I resealed it and gave it to Flint when he was gambling in the basement. He looked at it. He opened it up. He read it. And he looked at me. And he just crushed it like that. So that was the end of Frank Sacco, his ego.
Back for a second to High Times Magazine and Tom Forssad. Tom Forssad was a marijuana smuggler and salesperson, and he also had a meeting with Robert Evans, who was involved in the Cotton Club murders. He brought us some cocaine.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Right. Now, what do you know about, was Flint operation and these fellows around him involved in any kind of smuggling or drug dealing?
I ran Larry Flint's espionage agency. I had a single line dedicated to me that anyone who picked up and called the 800 number for the reward of $1 million came across my desk.
Gotcha.
I investigated every one of them. I brought 2 or 3 into the mansion, maybe 6 or 7. I interviewed all of them. None of them had any information. My own research tells me that it was a guy called James Franklin, a right-wing activist who blew Larry Flint's stomach out with 2 high-powered rifle bullets, which meant that they missed his vital organs. They nicked his spleen, they nicked his spinal cord, but they went right through him. And he survived only by the grace of God, because 3 days before, he'd gone on an all-liquid diet and water only. So he had no bad food in his stomach that could give him infection. But 6 weeks in a coma, he woke in his bedroom to all of his redneck family sitting around arguing. His mama was saying, well, Timmy is going to get $1.5 million, and Larry too, doling it out. And Larry woke up and heard it. He pretended not to hear it, but when he's kind of grunted on the old man, he's waking up. They did not know that he heard every word. As a consequence, every single one of them was written out of the will. That's how swift his justice was. His own mother.
Okay. Oh, by the way, since you were the guy answering the phone when these tips are coming in, did you ever receive any information that you're holding back in your pocket right now, hoping to benefit from?
Well, when you make those calls, the FBI mostly say, oh, that's the last guy. You know what I mean? We keep him on the last guy because it could be, it couldn't be. So it's a joke. We call him the very last guy to call. But somehow, if you're mentioning some little jewel that they're looking at, bada bing.
Yeah.
So it's like people say, there's going to be a bunch of communists meeting in Hollywood at this theater, 200 of them. No one would go to that. It would just be, communists were getting equal now.
I know, but Alan Graham, what I'm talking about is when people are calling in with tips, they want to sell information to Flint, and Alan Graham is answering the phones. I heard these stories about Larry Flint had porn videos of Ronald Reagan. Do you know anything about that?
You're talking about my hotline.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I qualified it mostly over the phone, but I couldn't qualify about a dozen, around half a dozen in, and a couple of them were believable, but they had no empirical data. They just said, well, I think it was that guy. He's made these statements to me and to my cousin, and on and on and on. No one had any direct information.
But what about, there's a story out there that Larry Flint had porno videos of Ronald Reagan, the president. Do you know anything about that?
We had a mock photograph of Ronald Reagan in a hat and cowboy boots with a hooker with a dildo. They were fornicating.
Right.
And then we had another one of the Vicky Morgan. If you look into the research about me in Springfield, you'll find out the Vicky Morgan sex tapes were the most prominent because I made a T-shirt, Alan Graham's. No, I have the Vicky Morgan sex tapes. Call me. That's how ballsy they were. FBI called me, came to my motel room. I showed them the fake photographs, which is what they were. They all laughed and said, that's the end of that. But sometimes the same guy who could put out the fake video can also put out the real goods. So I was never, because of my background, I was never written off as somebody who's a liar.
Right.
I was actually bringing them in to show them that it was fake.
Now there's
So
there's only one book out there about the Vicki Morgan sex tapes, the Vicki Morgan scandal, the death. And when I had the author of that book on this show, he was very hesitant to talk about the Vicki Morgan story. And it seems to me that there's still forces out there that want to keep this quiet. Can you tell the audience the entire Vicki Morgan? What is the Vicki Morgan story?
Behind it was Alfred Bloomingdale of Bloomingdale's. All the wealthy people in the East Coast would come to Vicki Morgan's house or whatever other hooker things that she had set up for them to come and have kinky and do whatever they wanted to do, and it would all be very quiet and private. On the other hand, some people were making tapes of Alfred Bloomingdale and a bunch of other famous people. However, they're going to be kept secret forever because the wealth behind Bloomingdale is so spread out to a lot of people with interests, shareholders. Even though he was a wholly owned corporation, all of his interests in, they're still good shares, and we will not damage that. So the truth about, he's one of those wealthy people because he has so many wealthy connections, will never be exposed.
And how did Vicki Morgan die?
Marvin Pankos beat her to death 18 times with a baseball bat.
And the Vicki Morgan tapes?
Well, those were another bunch of fake tapes. That was a Reagan tape.
Okay.
She was supposed to be doing Reagan. There were bunches of other tapes that never saw the light of day because they were so obviously pathetic.
Okay, well, let me ask a question. Then after Flint dies, where do all these tapes go?
Well, I have them.
Okay, well, you're my new best friend. I'm going to come see you. Where are you located? You're in California right now?
No, I'm not. I'm in Tanganyika.
Where's Tanganyika? That's a country.
Africa.
Africa. Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right. So you have a bunch of this material yourself. You walked away with it.
So tell me this.
Yes.
If you had data like that and you viewed it, what do you think you could do with it?
I think we should talk off the air. Okay, I think we should talk. I get involved in a lot of stuff. I think we should talk. Let me ask you a question that I've always wondered about, okay? It's driven me crazy. Alex Marti, how close of a friendship, a relationship did you have with Alex Marti, the convicted hitman?
Alex Marti was a 22-year-old ex-Air Force. He says he was a helicopter pilot from Argentina. And he told me this story one night. You know, I went on a lot of missions down there. One night, I fired an RPG into this house with all these, and they took out 18 bodies, count them. I said, that's a lot of money, like $12 each. But no, 25. Well, in Argentina, $25 is a lot of money back then. So that's how low level he was. Wow. Now, he claimed he was a helicopter pilot, and Flint hired him right after they got rid of Ryder, but he never, ever, ever could show me any credentials that he could fly a helicopter. So that was just a bullshit way of getting him with Flint. Saying, yeah, I can fly you to a foreign country, Larry, if things get tough. I got a stealth helicopter. Yeah, nothing.
And Larry was worried about having to flee the country, not because of illegal activity, but because of his blackmail material.
I had an Irish, German, French, and Danish passport always ready for him.
Yeah, that's another thing. Back in the old days, you could have a lot of passports back in the old days, too. It's not as easy as it once was.
I also had a Lear jet on the pad, fueled for Europe, Alaska, or wherever I want within an hour from calling.
Gotcha. Now, Alex Marti, he's convicted of this murder, this insane case with this madam, this transvestite madam. She's 300 pounds, 400 pounds. No one's quite sure. Okay. Now, but that appears to me to be a blackmail situation where he was hired to murder a blackmailer. Am I correct?
Mensa sits forever in prison as a fat cheddar. Oh, I don't know how he got overfed in the prison system.
Oh, really?
Must have been carbohydrate. He sits there. Nobody has anything nice to say about him. The only one with any dignity is Mensa. But Marty is a 300-pound pig, and I don't know the story of him being hired to kill a 300-pound transvestite.
Well, isn't that what he's in charge? That blackmail case with the guy, they were making phone calls back and forth, harassing each other.
Where's the court case? Where's the sentence?
There was a court case. I've seen the videos of it. I'll have to research that up, make some notes, and get back to you. But Mike,
are you sure it wasn't a Fugazi?
Fugazi?
You sure it wasn't a fraud?
No. I'll dig up that information. I'll get back to you. It's a very fascinating story. And one of the things about that story that fascinates me the most is that when this madam was using these harassing phone calls back and forth with this guy who was a John, and I believe it was over a blackmail situation, they would be calling back and forth, threatening each other, and then this madam would call the Vatican in Italy. She would get on the phone with the Vatican, hang up with them, and then go back to calling this guy back and forth. Do you have any information about that?
I think that was... I never heard of the case.
Okay.
And I was all over every bit of it, but there's so many tangling loose strings to many people that connect on one level but not on another.
Right.
And it's like a spider's web. So you unravel one, and you might find some info, but you won't end up with the story. So it's a wonderful way of leaving breadcrumbs that go the wrong way and people following them until they get lost.
Oh, very interesting. That's an interesting theory. But I'm going to dig up some links on that. I'll email it to you. Now, what is your connection?
You know what?
Yeah.
The truth is, I'm not interested in that. No offense.
Okay.
But I'm sure if that was the case, first of all, I can tell you this. No one in the right mind would be on the phone threatening and back and forth. It would happen one single time, and that would be the end of it. What would be known next was go close, have an interview, see if it's real, and then decide this. I want you to remember this intelligence operation name, OODA. It says on the internet, OODA loops, OODA loops. You got to read up on it to understand, but basically I'm going to tell you this. When you employ OODA loops, it's the essence of the art of war on steroids. It goes like this. I, as an operative, observe my quarry. Next, I get close and I orient what's going on, to whom, how many times. Then immediately after, I decide, OODA, I decide which course of action are you going to take. And immediately after that, in rapid succession, I act. Because the delay in that process is sheer like the billions and billions of nanoseconds that can change a project. Like, I'll wait till tomorrow. Oh, no. If you engage in OODA loops, you must do it when you observe, when you orient, when you decide, and you must act right now.
Yeah, I got to tell you something, man. That's really good advice for me right now because I'm having a huge problem with procrastination. And so I really appreciate that. We're talking to Alan Graham. You can find his website at coronado-clarion.com. /silo. That's where you can find all of his books. I remember Jim Morrison. He's Jim Morrison's brother-in-law. Before the Beatles were famous, he grew up right around the Cavern concert hall there. And then Poet Rain by Alan Graham. Fascinating life of working with the Larry Flint publication. Mr. Alan Graham, What is the story of Tim Leary and who was that guy with him, G. Gordon Liddy?
Well, first of all, I can help you in days with that procrastination. Just call me.
I will. I really need help with that. I got a big problem with that.
I've been a psychotherapist for 47 years, dealing with hardcore cons, little weak boys who can't get off their mommy's couch, all kinds of broken down PTSD military veterans.
Gotcha.
And I'm very effective in my job.
No, I'll definitely call you. I'll call you in a couple of weeks. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you've got no problem.
Yeah, but we only got about 10 minutes left. We got less than 10 minutes, so I want to hear about Tim Leary and G. Gordon Liddy, and then you got to come back and tell us Mitch Warbell and that kind of stuff too. Tim Leary and G. Gordon Liddy.
I had a Bible. It was a thick 300-page list of phone calls from every celebrity that Flint ever came in contact with or called. He did it all the time. Jack Nicholson was in the book. Dick Gregory was in the book. Timothy Leary was in the book. Gordon Liddy. All of their personal information. I had that Bible, and it traveled with me, and I called every one of them. Called in Timothy Leary. We hired him as a celebrity pimp, which means he went around Hollywood, got all the bankers and all the radicals that he knew to come and meet Larry Flint at a big party in his mansion. And it went on and on and on. So during that operation, let's say a shadow operation was set up. Everyone that came in, we took their keys because we said, if you're going to drink here, we'll drive you home. Well, they were kept 2 hours, and while they were kept, the keys would be copied.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Who came up with that idea?
So when they made the keys, they had 50, 60, 70 sets of keys of access to all of those homes.
Yeah.
And some of them are very famous antique dealers who had little vaults in their basement and all sorts of stuff that if they were robbed, they couldn't tell the police.
Right.
So, but we knew a lot. Anyway, they knew a lot. That went on for 5 more years. And to this day, half the people who were breached still don't know that their jewels were replaced by fake ones.
Wow.
Not only that, if they knew, they couldn't say a thing because they would lose on their insurance. Would you say anything?
So, Alan Graham, a situation like that, was Larry Flint aware of this, that his guys are going out there doing burglaries?
Totally oblivious to it.
Now,
You've got to remember, he was on speedballs.
Yeah.
The doctor would come in, Dr. Lauren, interject him regularly. Like John Kennedy would come into L.A., he'd hit him in the butt with amphetamine.
Yeah, we did a whole show about that too, yeah. But Timothy Leary, what do you make of Timothy Leary? Was he a government agent?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
But he could also be called on if necessary. They had some stuff on him. It could have ruined his new private eye business. But he was scratching. He was doing lectures. He did one with Timothy Leary. They went on tour together, arguing. It's like chalk and cheese. Very boring.
You're talking about G. Gordon. You're talking about G. Gordon Liddy. They had stuff on him. But
G. Gordon Liddy was trying to do in Timothy Leary, and he told them. They all went on and discussed the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. So it was kind of like topical. There's these two old warriors, Gordon Liddy, the FBI, and Timothy Leary, the traitor who went to live down in Algiers.
But they kicked him out of Algiers because he was meeting with the U.S. Embassy. He was meeting with the CIA.
Well, what was happening next was they were doing a deal on repatriation. If he came back, gave certain information, he would be able to go free on like a 5-year probation. He accepted that. That's when the Moroccans said, out now. We're not waiting. Kicked him out. He came back, and he got a job as a DJ of all people in Orange County. He got somebody gave him an old white Mercedes, and the rest of his life, he struggled, scratching, trying to make a buck with a wife who was on blow and a grown son who was not grown but about to be grown, and no real income. He wrote a book about marijuana, and it was totally obliterated by the press. They were not interested in drugs at that time. It was 1990. And so he'd lost his power. He was persona non grata. He got cancer. He would do a line of blow every morning and every night, and he would invite everybody to his mansion, anybody, to talk about death, dying, and him.
Right.
Talk about ego, huh?
What about that break, though, when he was at that hospital and he did that prison break? Was that like an inside job, or I heard he was just walked out of there?
He was on the road. What happened was, he was on the road with he was traveling somewhere to get to no. He was at an open-air prison. It wasn't a locked prison, right?
No. Yeah, it was something like he was at a jail first, but then they moved him over to a psychiatric hospital to take some tests.
Right.
And according to him, he climbed on the telephone wires to get out of there. Okay, now come on, man. You know that's ridiculous.
He walked out of the gate like a lot of mental health people could walk out of the gate. There was a counseling center there where you could go in and counsel.
Right.
It wasn't just a prison; it was a psychiatric hospital. He walked out on a phone call from the weatherman.
Right.
It picked him up in the station wagon and drove him across the Mexican border and down. I think he got a flight to Morocco. I'm not sure exactly what happened after that. Next thing you know, he's up hiding in
Algiers,
the top room of the embassy, talking out the window only to people.
Now, were you friends with Leary during that period of time, during around the time that I escaped?
Well, I was his meal ticket because we published a magazine, and he was the editor, and he always come whining to me, Larry's asking too much of us. And I was saying, well, you better get on with it. So he was always saying, Alan, you're the closest to Larry. Can you stop him? We can't do all this work. Whiny little girl.
Yeah.
So he was relying on me for his bread and butter. If that check had stopped, he'd have been nowhere.
Well, we've been talking to Alan Graham. It's gone by so fast, my friend. Another great show. Go to Coronado-Clarion, CLARION.com, /silo, SILO. That's where you can get the books, and you can see his appearances. His YouTube channel is up there. I remember Jim Morrison, too, before the Beatles were famous. Poet Rain by Alan Graham. You can check them out in person. They're doing a Jim Morrison museum in Cancun, Mexico. So if you keep popping into this Coronado-Clarion website.com, you can see all the upcoming events. And I hope I'm going to have you come back and we can get into Mitch Rebell and a little bit more stuff. How's that, my friend?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, man. Hey, Alan, man, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you, my friend.
Can you see some rough cuts, will you? Can I see some rough cuts?
Yes. Coming up. And I'll send it to you by tomorrow.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.